Welcome to this meeting of Pendle Council's Executive. Item 1 is declarations of interest, and I have an other registrable, other registrable interest in items 4, 13 and 14 as a director of the respective joint ventures, and so I'll be withdrawing from the meeting on those items. Are there any other declarations of interest? Asjad?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, item 4, 13 and 14. Item 4, do I need to, is that like a personal prejudicial kind of precuniary kind of, do I have to leave it for the meeting as well, or?
Yes, yeah. So the new regime, other I can't say this, other ORIs, you are required not to take part.
Can't speak either.
Yeah. Can I ask, are there any further declarations of interest, please?
I will, for the same reason for item 4, I shan't stay for 13 and 14.
Okay, but you're declaring an interest?
In 4.
Okay. Any further? Nope. Thank you very much for that. Item 2 is public question time. Are there any questions from members of the public? No, thank you very much. Before I move on to item 3, minutes, I think we will do introductions around the room. There may be people who are watching the live stream who aren't familiar with who everybody is. So my name is David Whip, and I chair the executive. I go to my left, Emma.
I'm Emma Barker, I'm the legal advisor to the committee.
Good evening, Philip Spur, Director of Place.
If you go to the back bench.
Neil Watson, Assistant Director for Planning.
Sutcliffe, Councillor for Horsfield and Waterside.
Councillor Sarah Coburn-Price, Councillor for Bullsworth and Fulridge.
Councillor David Coburn-Price for the same ward.
Thank you. Coming to Asjad.
Asjad Mahmood, Deputy Director of Pendle Council and Economic Growth.
Councillor Faraz Ahmed, who's substituting for Councillor Hanif.
Thank you, Faraz.
Very pleased to go with.
Councillor Andy Bell, Ivy Bridge. Councillor David Hartley, Adrian Coates Woods.
Councillor Lowell.
Full.
Paul Preston, Democratic Services Manager. Ryan Gibbert, Senior Regional Chancellor.
Icky Bukhari, Head of Economic Growth.
Louise Wells, Head of Finance, Deputy Section 151 Officer.
Lawrence Conway, Interim Chief Exec, Pendle Council.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the meeting on 19th of June. Are we content? Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Councillor David Coburn-Price.
Tiny typo in paragraph 15 where Sarah's surname is spelled Prince rather than Price. Second paragraph of first page.
Shocking.
So it's shocking.
Absolutely shocking.
Email.
With that slight amendment, I'll move those. Seconded. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Those are carried. Right. I'm going to have to leave the room. Councillor Asjad Mahmood is going to have to leave the room. Sarah Coburn-Price is going to have to leave the room. So before I do so, you are going to need to appoint somebody to chair the meeting in my absence. Can I propose Councillor Lola Whip?
Can I present that?
Yeah, there you go. Right. I'm not sure yet to move.
Right, okay, so this item's on the Spring Mill development at Earby, and it's to seek a decision on whether this council should adopt and maintain the landscaped open spaces.
Can I speak as a member of the public?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. When this development was approved and throughout the planning process, the area of land adjacent to Stonybank Road was intention to keep that in public ownership. And unfortunately, there was a very prominent tree cut down as part of the development, and that was necessitated by the attenuation tank being in that location. You couldn't have a tree there. So local residents have felt very clearly that there ought to be that public ownership, and it ought to be part of the public estate, and I think that the council should adhere to the decisions that we took a couple of years ago in that respect. At the other end of the site, there's a compound on part of the land that is in Pendle Council ownership already, and that area the developers agreed to reinstate back to a green field. I did try and get interested in creating a pump track there, but the Town Council weren't interested, and we didn't know to look after it if such a development had taken place. The latest question is a tree planting scheme, including treatment of a boggy area in the centre of the site. I've got some interest from Lancashire County Council in supporting that with external grant funding. So what I'd like to see there, and this is perhaps not something that I need to withdraw from the meeting because it's not to do with the joint venture, but what I'd like to see there is a good tree planting scheme that will be an asset to the area in future. And you know, once you've dealt with the joint venture issue in future, I'll be able to participate in that and take part in the discussion and decision. But for the time being, I'll leave you to it.
Thank you. Anybody want to come in on this? You wanting to? You can just.
The report is primarily seeking a decision on the adoption of an area of land at the top of the site in the appendix. And there was a decision taken several years ago to adopt it in principle, but since then, further structures has been realised on the site, the wall, the tank. So the reason being the report, the officer recommendation has been to reduce the costs and also the commuters some as well, which we can say we can renegotiate, but that will run out as well in time. So it's found to be adoption of that land principally and whether the council wants to get the costs that can be met. Additionally, the area at the bottom of the site, which the gentleman from the public describes, is council on land, the compound, plus the area to the bottom, just that landscape and all that, and delegating decisions on both to the direction of place.
Yeah, I do take some issues with the reasoning. It mentions the attenuation tank. In the rubric, that is to be adopted by Yorkshire Water, so therefore the liability would be on Yorkshire Water to maintain and repair that asset, not the councils as landowner. So I don't think that does factor into the decision as much.
I think we'll consider that any kind of hidden liability that came as a result of that.
Yeah.
But
If it wasn't adopted, obviously we can reject us adopting the land in sequence, can't we? Developers' requests setting a precedent. I mean, it's always been the case that we've taken on these parcels of land. Cornwall Place in Bonalswick, very good example, where we got a dowry from the developer. I can't remember what you call it. That sum, commuted sum. And we took it on as a council, and that was since transferred to Bonalswick Town Council.
So I think in terms of precedent, there's already one set for this council.
That's a question.
Councillor Bell.
I'm reading what you're saying there about the Yorkshire Water taking all of the attenuation tank and the sewage, but does that include the ground as well, i.e. the ground maintenance? Because if you look at currently, if you've got a private residence and gas board or water board come down, you've got a water leak in front of your house, from the mains to your property, you will be liable for costs. Would this be the case, say here, where we'd be liable, or will they take that on as their responsibility for cost as well? That's my concern, is would we be hit with a hidden cost we weren't expecting of, yeah, they'll say they'll look after the tank and the sewage, but to get access to it, we'd be liable.
I mean, I'm not an engineer, so the engineering manager said that, yeah, Yorkshire Water would take on responsibility for maintenance of the tank and the piping infrastructure. But beyond that, I mean, that would concern any, hidden liability or, any costs that we weren't expecting over the years. So, these are not full answers that we probably understand.
Yeah.
Did you want to?
Yeah, the issue of easement, I think, which you can't be referring to, yes, that would be our responsibility to make sure that the water authority has got access to it and being allowed for the easement to them for them to maintain that. So that would be our liability for us to make sure that that can be afforded to them during the course of the ownership.
Yeah.
Chair, I just wanted to have, would then, from what we've seen, as I said, I'm only substituting here, I'm just sort of trying to just gather some further information. So would Yorkshire Water then be responsible for this and not Pembrokeshire Council? Is that what we're trying to determine here?
Yeah.
All right. That's fine, I'm happy with the recommendation.
I mean, I think we should not decline this, personally.
Yeah, can I just ask a question?
Let's come.
Yeah. Alternative to adoption, 26. So though there's raised concerns about the saleability, in fact, and saleability of the homes, with a financial interest in there. Are these properties freehold or leasehold?
I don't have the answer to that. As I remember, they are leasehold.
Right.
They are leasehold. So that I would need to clarify and check on that to give you a full answer, but my understanding is they are leasehold.
Yeah. And do we know how many properties are already sold on the site?
I don't have it to hand, but yeah, we have been told, we do have it on record, but I don't have that to hand.
No, because I went round today and I spoke to the site manager, and 7 of the 13 together housing homes have gone, and 3 normal homes have gone. But they said that as soon as they get landscaping in and water and things like that in, they do expect the sales to go up. But it was just with the being leasehold, I thought that all that had changed, hadn't it? Developers could no longer do leasehold.
I don't think it's going out or just shut.
I think it's in the process.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, one of the things on here as well is the tract value is actually increased from the size that was originally agreed upon. But obviously that's going, if we take that on as against the recommendation, that will create a substantive sum of monies that we'll have to find for the maintenance, because it's a large project rather than what it was. But one of the looking on here was about the you've got Stony Bank Road frontage, so you've got length, all that going, but you've also got various walls from what I've read in here that will need to be quite maintained. Currently say £500 per annum,
but we know currently, yes, 3.6% APR, inflation. So what's it going to be next year? Is it going to be it's going to be 500 plus the original agreed amount is substantially lower for a 10-year period. To me, financially wise, it doesn't have a, is it actually, is it cost effective for us, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think my answer to that is we need to renegotiate the sum with Barnfield Construction, and they've indicated they're open to that discussion.
Chair. I mean, that sum there, I know not many people might know everything that's going on with Earby Parks and South Park and things like that. Earby Town Council at the moment are taking a backseat to everything and seem to be opposed to everything that goes on in and around the town. They seem to have their own agenda, and I don't know what it is. And since that, they pulled out of funding to the South and Earby Park, leaving £15,000 to be found by Pendle Council to take over. And to me, especially now that we've got the green parks, the flags for the green parks, maybe that money could be earmarked to actually go into the parks there and other things.
Chair, obviously just reading through recommendations, I think I would be quite happy to go with the recommendations and obviously then delegate authority to the Director of Place to review further proposals, and I'm happy to move forward and obviously vote for the recommendation.
I'm happy to second both of those.
Okay. Is that so that's just the second recommendation?
Well, basically for both, on the first and the second one. So decline the request by Pearl together from Pendlebury Council to adopt the land, and then obviously let's delegate the authority to the Director of Place to obviously agree the final proposals and move forward.
Okay. I mean, if we had a renegotiated sum, that brought that to a nil cost in terms of risk. Councillor Bell.
I'm just looking at the feasibility and looking at the time scale in this as well, but it's obviously open to discussion. But I'm happy to continue with the proposal that I've just put forward.
Councillor Bell.
Yes, I'm looking at section 24, which was, this recommendation was made by West Ravens Area Committee before it was known that the landscape plan was to be revised, and therefore the full legal and financial implications of adoption were known. Officers have since reviewed the updated position and advised that the transfer should not proceed at this time. Looking at this, it was saying we'll adopt it, we'll take the original community summary accepted, but obviously everything's changed since then. The financial side for us would be an increase. The area of responsibility will be increased.
Just on the area of responsibility, I think that is still up for negotiation.
In terms of the actual physical area of land?
Yeah, I believe there's a strip along the back of the houses, the plots, which is what's adding to that increased size in area. And I believe there's a... Councillor Whip did a quick sketch. I believe they were being incorporated into the plots as part of the garden.
There's this strip of land down the side.
Yeah, that's what's adding
there.
there.
Part of the public open space. The developer would like to extend the gardens. Planning have been proposed because the gradients, and you can you'll be able to see into your neighbour's garden. They might be happy in principle if the gradients were level down. But that would need to be approved by planning. But yeah, the developer would like to extend the option, which would give people the gardens space, and it would remove this kind of this whole useful strip of the open space outside as well, and just leave. If the developer gets away and gets to remove it, would just leave this top bit. But yeah, so as that's not yet been set by, not being approved by planning, the point is that the original principal decision was based on this top area, because that's what the estates team were told at the time, and it should have been this larger area, which officially it is still a larger area until plan approved otherwise.
Yeah.
Is that the area where they drilled through the water table and it is seeping into the residents' properties below?
I have no knowledge of that. Oh, was that a few weeks ago? I think that's...
No, it's been happening since the development.
Quite a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But where they've sunk the heat pumps down through the table, then the properties below, their gardens are sort of like permanently wet.
Right. I know that there's like a drainage at the bottom now. Whether that's caused by, it might influence, I'm not quite sure. I think there was an email, a few weeks ago. It's some sort of water issue. But again, I thought that's like a kind of a one-off thing. If there's a long-term issue, that's what I'm aware of.
Just a slight correction to the chair. The plots are freehold, but some of them are leasehold.
Shared ownership. Shared ownership of the leasehold, the rest of free.
Yeah.
Chair, if I may, with your permission, it would appear that members have some questions about this in terms of the costs, and that perhaps a way forward, and it's just a suggestion, is that we have the negotiation first, and if time allows, and I'll look to my colleague officers, if time allows, is to bring it back to the next executive with firmer financial costs for the long-term maintenance of this particular site, because there does appear to be some ambiguous scenarios in this in terms of the finances, and I think maybe...
Philip, do you want to come in?
Yeah, if I can, Chair. So very clearly in relation to the top portion of land at the upper end of the site, the clear offer of recommendation is that we should not adopt. And really I suppose the reasons for that are probably set out at section 17 in summary. Yes, there is some lack of clarity with regard to the specific area of land, but it is certainly larger than what was previously agreed by executive. There is the issue around the attenuation tank that was touched on. There's also a boundary wall and so on and so forth. In terms of the precedent issue, the council is seeking in many ways to divest itself of assets at this moment in time rather than actually acquire additional assets, which is probably the reference to precedent in there. In terms of the Chief Exec's comment around quantum and sum, at the top of page 5, paragraph 22, there is reference to a revised sum of just short of £63,000, and officers feel that if members wish to adopt, a sum of £63,000 is a more realistic figure. There would still need to be some further negotiation, Chair, but we feel if members wish to adopt, that's a more realistic 10-year cost than the originally quoted just short of £24,000. But I come back to the point, the officer recommendation for, we believe, very sound reasons, is that the council should not adopt it, but obviously that's a decision for yourself to make this evening.
Good deferred ones, I would say. I know Barnfield they're against deferment into further ones because they're taking sales interest now, so they want to be able to tell potential buyers, whether they've got a service charge or whether they don't have a service charge.
Okay. Councillor Bell.
Can I propose that, as our Chief Executive has actually mentioned, that the officers go back to Barnfields, look at the negotiation figures, look at the updated, should we say, financial costs or implications, and I will actually move that the recommendation from Mr. Lawrence is carried forward until next month.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, with all due respect, hasn't the Director of Places clearly pointed out the financial implications that are there? So everything's quite clear within the document.
It is a lot. where the agreement is for 23, well, just short of 24,000, but the realistic figure at the moment is 63,000.
It's all 10 years.
Which is over a 10-year period. But at the moment, we're looking at 24 rather than 60. So if I agree with Mr. Lawrence was saying then, was to go back to look at realistic options and then to come back next month and then to make that decision. Just to defer for 1 month only, rather than defer for 3 months, just do 1 month deferments. Obviously, like I say, the figures we propose there on chapter 22 plus on chapter 17, there is a disparity there. And I'd rather have a lot more clarity.
Philip?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm kind of reluctant to get involved in the conversation as officer, but again, take the Chief Exec's lead. Potentially a way forward could be for the Executive to make a decision that you do not wish to adopt, or if you do wish to adopt, and I come back to Ryan's comment with regard to our partners wanting a quick decision, you could agree to adopt, but leave or delegate agreement of this precise figure, precise sum, to myself. If that would be a way forward, the committee will be happy with.
Yeah, I mean, my suggestion along those lines, Councillor Bell, would be to agree subject to a renegotiated sum with Barnfield Construction. That's more in line with the expected costs involved. Yeah.
So, sorry, Chair, once again, is that agreeing to recommendations but on a negotiated sum?
That's deleting recommendation 1 and instead saying you agree to the adoption subject to that sum being renegotiated with the officers to bring it in line with those costs expected rather than what they've already offered. Yeah. So if that's not met, then you wouldn't be agreed. Is that acceptable? And that gives the timescales that they're wanting as well. Doesn't necessarily need to come back, but obviously if it's in line with, yeah.
If you're happy with that, Chair, yeah.
Yeah. Do you accept that? As
yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only other thing, on recommendation 2, authority to the director of place, in consultation with the leader?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. That's fine. Obviously, it's not the area that I obviously cover, but you know, it's still an interesting area, and obviously I'm kind of interested in such projects. I don't think, you know, if we're not taking the responsibility, let Yorkshire Water deal with it, and let's wipe our hands off it. And
yeah, it's the land around, which is a public open space,
sure.
was, and I think as councillors we want it to continue to be, don't we?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just a minor governance point that I'm sure my colleague Paul would flag outside the meeting. Any agreement probably can't be delegated to the leader given the fact he's not in the room because he has an interest in this particular issue. So there would need to be another member to actually agree those figures.
So this is the landscaping at the bottom of the site, which is Pendle Council. It's used as the compound, Pendle Council's land, isn't it?
If you want it to be agreed in consultation with a member, I guess the point is it can't be the leader given the fact the leader has an interest, hence the fact he's not in the room at this moment in time. It would have to be
because
another...
Because it's part of Burl.
Yeah.
Okay.
And because you're not part of Burl, you could take that position.
sorry, Chair, I'm coming back. Sorry. Like I said, I'm very happy with the recommendation because I think the report's quite clear from my point of view, and I'm just still concerned. I still don't understand the negotiation that we need to have and what kind of negotiation do we still need, because everything seems quite transparent.
If you look at section 17, the original agreed amount for the ongoing 10 years was 23,840.
That's right.
Section 22, straight across the page, following the review of the updated landscape design for Pearl, officers estimate that a revision of the original feature based on the square foot French, which also includes the wall and an inflation increase, could be more in the region of 62,836.
That's right.
So when they say if we take 23,840, we have got £30,000 discrepancy, not including any fluctuations in inflation over the 10 years.
So we would be on the back foot straight away. So instead of being having money for, say, 8 years, we'd only have enough for 5 years. So the council would then be liable then for the remaining 5 years, if costs go up.
Yeah.
Can I just bring Councillor Sutcliffe indicated to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I think the report's quite clear that there's a financial risk to the council. It sets that out in the recommendations. I think I understand councillors wanting to receive more information about an updated cost, but there still sounds like there was going to be a cost and a substantial one. And so I think that deleting or changing the recommendations is inappropriate at this point. Simply defer the report, bring it back next time with an accurate cost, and then you can make the decision then. But to start amending the recommendations, I think is just pointless without the information. So just get the information, keep the process simple, and make the decision at that point. I think we just overcomplicated everything in the conversation.
I'd like to about what Mr. Spur said about that we're supposed to be transferring assets, not gaining assets. The fact that this asset will then fall in the Ely Town Council, Ely Town Council will not take on any more assets because they don't want the assets that they have already, so it's going to be left, especially with LGR going on and everything else. You know, it's we're supposed to be transferring rather than gaining.
I think with LGR going on, what happens in 10 years won't mean much to us then.
No.
Okay, we had a proposal on the table.
Yeah, I'm still happy to go with the recommendation. But I think
Are we backtracking
I still wouldn't mind. I'm still
on what came out of that discussion?
Yeah, I'm still happy to go with the recommendation. So I don't feel as though the recommendation as set out is quite clear. But saying that as well, I also agree with what Councillor Ash says now as well, because if we are going to be mixing and matching, we might as well just defer it over.
Sorry, that's not very clear at all.
Just on, I mean, yeah, just Director of Place did suggest a kind of like a delegated approach, and recommendation 2 does allow that for the top end as well as the bottom, just at the end, to determine on that to play to the top end, so we could get that within the recommendation as well.
Philip?
Sorry, hopefully this is the final one from myself, Chair. Ryan, are you able to just kind of advise committee on the time-critical nature of the decision? Can we wait a month, I suppose, is the question through yourself, Chair?
Barnfield said no. I mean, we were going to take this to an earlier executive, and on Barnfield, so if it's going to be delayed, please don't delay it any further than this meeting. They're taking sales interest now, and if they retain the land, then the only alternative option appears to be a service charge for residents. And since they're taking sales, they need to tell prospective buyers what full cost of that house is, you know, rather than entering into legal agreements and going back and saying, actually, there's another cost for you. So, yeah, they think it's time imperative that they understand what decision is now, one way or the other.
I'd be happy to propose we take option 2. Now, propose that. Which is the executive delegates authority to Director of Place to agree final proposals, landscape and drainage place, works upon the site, bearing to the end, and to determine all matters related to the top end. I'll propose that.
Would that be including renegotiating the sum?
Well, it's to agree final proposal, so everything that's within that remit, including cost.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that?
I'll have to second that.
Okay. All those in favour?
Sure, I just ask you did mention in consultation with a member, I believe, as well as part of that recommendation was moved at some stage. So was that included or not?
That wasn't.
It's there on here, like I say, the recommendation was the exec delegates authority to the Director of Place. That was the recommendation. I'll stand by that. There's the one that's been brought before us.
We've already been to the vote, so yeah, Philip.
Apologies, Chair. Just taking Councillor Bell's point, and to determine all matters relating to the top end. Officers tomorrow morning will go away and look at how we implement this. I am not clear sitting here whether members wishes to adopt this site or not.
It's already put forward that the council is trying to not acquire any more areas.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair.
So we've taken a decision on recommendation 2.
Yeah, Chair.
We've still got to make a decision on recommendation 1 on whether or not to adopt the land.
That's right.
So could I get a proposal whether we do or do not, please?
Chair, what I said originally as well was I was happy with the recommendation itself, so I would still be happy with recommendation 1 as well.
So you're moving that we decline to request.
Yeah. Recommendation for item 1 and 2.
Okay.
If anyone's happy to second.
Yeah, that's second.
Yeah. All those in favour? All those against? Yep. Next item of business. Someone could let everyone know to come back in.
You don't know the agenda. Okay, item 5, proposed changes to the planning system. Councillor Lula-Whip, can you lead off on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Happy to move that we respond to forms set out in Appendix 2. I think the revised changes are undemocratic. Decisions on local places should be made locally, and the revised changes don't reflect that. I think we have a very good system here in Pendle with the area committees and the local planning decisions, and it's a shame to see that go. So,
okay, thank you very much. Asjad?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Totally echo what Lola Councillor Whip has just said. I think this is quite undemocratic. It's going in the wrong way, wrong direction. We did probably do need some changes, but not the. I think in Pendle it works very well. You have that local expertise, local knowledge, local experience, and you can't replace that. With what's been proposed within this framework. So yeah, not in favour of.
Thank you very much. Well, I would certainly agree that it is a denial of democracy. The national delegation scheme will gag residents and gag their representatives, because very, very few, if any, development control matters will come before councillors, and no disrespect to Mr Watson, but the gateway to actually getting those major applications considered at committee will be considerable, with the planning officers saying, there's planning issues that need to be taken into account. So I would have pitched this a little bit stronger, but I think I'd be coming from a more political perspective, and I did make that comment to Neil earlier on. Sarah?
So, well, I would thoroughly agree with this, with what you just said. I think from our experience at Cone Area Committee, and of course you've intimated here that perhaps area committees would no longer be doing any planning applications and it would just be DM that would do them all. So the area committee would go in terms of planning. So that would have such an impact on local people. In fact, although the officers do a great job giving a planning resume, it's surprising the ones that are contentious. So I'm just thinking about in Ash's ward, there was a small wall. There was a little wall, and, you know, it definitely wouldn't put it as like a major planning application. But the people came and spoke on the wall. They said it was bad. There was lots of discussion. We had a big... It was seen to be right. Everybody could see that there was consideration for this wall. What the end point was doesn't really matter, in the sense that that thorough discussion was had. Now, actually, if the government got their way, what would happen would be the planning officers, who perhaps hadn't listened to what everybody's had to say, would just make that decision on delegation, and people would feel thwarted, people would feel frustrated, and people would feel sad. So it's not just how councillors might be democratically elected. I actually think residents would be so frustrated by that, even if councillors are frustrated. I totally agree with the training. I hope there's a written exam, because I think just watching a video is, well, I mean, anybody could say they've watched a video. Let's actually see whether people know what the MPPF's about, and then the councillors can properly speak from some area of expertise. I think you make a very good point on page 5 when you talk about the lack of staff is also the fundamental issue to improve speed. That's certainly true. And I know a couple of times I've said to David, who's chairman of Cone Area Committee, what happened to this application? He's like, not seen any papers on it. There's no thing about it, it's just your staff are so busy with such a heavy caseload. How many cases do they have each? It's a lot, isn't it?
37 average at the moment.
Wow. Yeah, it's you know, it is a lot. I thought it was also interesting where you said here at the bottom of page 4, reforming schemes of delegation might lead to more refusals for inadequate content of applications. And again, that's something we see at Cone Area. You weren't there last month, but sometimes we say we have to defer it because we don't know this or we don't know that. And that was so this time. If it was just on delegation, perhaps it would just be refused because it's not known. And quite often as well, when they come back to Cone Area, you've not seen this yet, Andy, there's a thing that we're not quite liking, it's tweaked a little bit, it's improved, and it comes back, and do you know what, that's the point, it's better, whereas it might just have been approved, or might just have been refused, but in the end, it's been through a process, and it is worthwhile. And then my final plea, which I know that Mr. Watson doesn't agree with me about, is the sort of grey area. So where there's a grey area, sometimes Mr. Watson says, well, I can see it the other way, because it's on design. It's something that's a decision that isn't so cut and dried. And I would say that where Pendle falls down here is it doesn't have a design code. And we've got the National Design Code. I know you're disagreeing with me.
Completely disagree.
We don't have the National... We have the National Design Code, we have all our separate little sub-codes. But to have a Pendle design code would help in the smaller applications where we want to be certain about design. And, you know, we won't get the opportunity, perhaps in the future, to talk about those nuances that could be something like a kneeler on a roof, or it could be something very small that we could specify to improve a design. It would just be approved now, and over time, if a load of applications come forward and are just passed, and there's an accretion of passing, then over time, I think the urban fabric will be diminished. So I think I was quite interested as well about the committee size, because the maximum committee size here would be smaller than the committee that we've got for DM, which frankly I would agree with. I think that committee is too large. And I would also fully agree that any councillor calling anything in should have legitimate planning reasons to call it in, and not just call it in, which is the current situation. So, or I suppose all we can do is hope and pray after the submission of this consultation response. Thank you.
I'm going to perhaps repeat something I said earlier on, that there will be no effective local involvement with making planning decisions when this comes in. There will be no effective involvement. You're talking about things coming to committee. They will not come to committee, and you know, it'll be entirely plan-based, and if it fits in with the plan, the MPPF, take on. And you know, the sorts of applications that would perhaps be brought to committee in terms of the new rubric, well, so few and far between in Pendle, they're almost non-existent. So I think there would not be that local input at all. I'll bring Neil in after David Corbin-Price.
Thank you.
In case you've got any further comments, Neil.
Yes, just one question for Neil before we start actually. Is Pendle's processes different? Are Pendle's processes different from other councils, and in what way?
I don't know another council who has area committees,
Okay.
and we don't have a scheme of delegation.
Right.
We've got a scheme of member approval. So
Okay.
we don't have a true scheme of delegation here, which every other council I'm aware of has a scheme of delegation.
Okay, right. So, as you say, at both those points, it's council involvement being removed by other councils. And I guess this sort of consultation is clearly a method by which they want to try to reinforce that across the entire country and take away Pendle's special structures. So you can see what they're doing, and you can see that our response is going to be one of, well, we want to retain some discretion, lots of words of discretion, legitimate planning reasons, which I think are all good things. Sometimes we do make things a bit too complicated. We do have too many reasons to be different and to make things inefficient. And I can see how stripping away all the member involvement would make it more efficient, for sure. But I think, as Sarah pointed out, you end up with something that just becomes faceless. I mean, we would all love it if developers developed what we wanted. You know, we've developed a local plan, we want a portfolio of housing of different shapes and sizes, and yet developers come along and go, well, it's our choice, and we don't care what you want. You know, there are no bungalows, there are no flats, there are no starter homes. You know, these things don't exist. And we've sat through the local plan hearings and heard lots and lots of things about what everybody wants in terms of numbers of housing, but what we want is a certain sort of housing that fits in. And the design code would help with that, for sure. You know, we know towns have identities, and we know that they're like that. So I think the responses in here are good and solid. Obviously, we want to try to retain some of it, but we accept that some degree of change is required, I think. As the point about planning training, I think, is a good one. If we are going to have people involved in planning, then, you know, as we talked about before, we talked about a planning committee of some kind, there does have to be some training, and there does have to be some sort of test of that. Just sitting through a presentation on safeguarding or whatever, it doesn't mean you're suddenly qualified to know all about it. So I think actually getting involved in that and getting some sort of, you know, proper certification is valuable.
Thank you very much. Neil.
Chairman, it's just my own professional view on this, is that it is going too far. I think it's taking away democracy too much. I think there's a halfway house that could be had that would get perhaps a better balance, but I think my view is that it is going too far, and you won't see the applications at committee. Probably think there are too many there now, if I'm honest, but and there's a balance, but we don't always get the consistency right across the area committees. That's one of the things this will get better, but it is actually taking it a little too far.
Thank you. The other angle to this is that, of course, it won't be very long before we're in a big unitary size and nature to be determined, but you know, think about these changes in the context of 500,000 residents within a local planning authority. and think about what impact and what influence not only representatives will have, but what residents will have, because this rides roughshod over the concerns of residents, and everything will be swept aside in favour of so-called efficient decision making. But I would point out that Pendle Council's timeliness with decisions is exemplary and probably unmatched by any other council in the country, Neil?
Not far off at the moment, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it's all based on a false premise anyway. But let's put this to the vote. Those in favour of the proposal put by Councillor Lowell and seconded by Councillor. Yep, thank you very much. That's carried. And the next one is Lancashire Local Nature Recovery Strategy. Now this is a county council strategy, so I suppose I better declare an other registrable interest as a member of the county council, but I don't think I'm affected to any greater extent than any other resident, so I'm not going to withdraw from the meeting and I'll carry on with the chair. So, Lola?
Happy to move that we endorse the strategy, Chair. I mean, this council's already endorsed it previously, and I don't see any change in that position.
No, there aren't any changes of any significance, none as far as Pendle concerned. So we agreed before, there's no reason why we shouldn't agree it now. Asdad? Second that. Sarah?
The Gib Hill Guardians have a WhatsApp group, and they tell me that Gib Hill...
Sorry, are you declaring an interest?
I'm not a member of them,
Okay.
I'm not a trustee or anything, but I'm on their WhatsApp group, and they say that Gib Hill is not in this document shown as a local nature reserve, and so therefore we should definitely be staking our claim. It's our biggest local nature reserve, and so therefore should be in this document. But I actually think rather than just knocking a small inaccuracy that's a relatively recent change, I would like Pendle Council to reply, because I genuinely think this is a superb document. We reviewed it earlier on, didn't we? It's very well laid out, it's very well written, it's packed full of great information that just amazed me. It's very hopeful, in terms of red squirrels and key wildlife and ecological indicator species. I think we should reply and offer them a bit of praise for the great work that they have done, and it's going to help us highlight places that could be LNIs or could be part of the 30% in 2030, those patches of land. It could help us with that. I think we should thank them and give them a bit of praise, as well as say, don't forget Gib Hill.
Thank you. I mean, that is the thrust of the comments that we were going back to them with, to say that it's a good document, and if it isn't explicit that we support it, we can put that in the response. David?
Yes, I did go through the online document, the PDF, over the last couple of days, and it's very well written. But again, it's more leaning towards that side, to the west side of Lancashire, the Atlantic salmon and things like that, and the gulls. I'd like to see some more under 24 species, things like the breeding curlews and things like that we have at this side to be added to their target species and things like that. That would be fine. And you get the brief mentions the fact that we're on the Yorkshire border, so we've got the limestone outcrops and things. But it would be nice if we just maybe a little bit more mention. But it is a wonderful document, I will say. It is a wonderful document, and I have been through it. But I would just like to see some of the rare species that we have here highlighted.
Thank you very much. Being a true aviite, David, and living on the upper reaches of the Aire. Of course, Atlantic salmon don't affect you, but for somebody that lives within the Ribble catchment, I would point out that we do support migratory fish coming up Stockbeck and breeding in Valley Gardens in Barnoldswick. So there's obviously a territorial divide that splits us off in the watershed. So perhaps, Neil, you could just weave in the point that our watershed position does mean that parts of our borough do drain into the North Sea, and that issues such as moorland species should have a greater emphasis. Is that okay?
Yes, Chairman, I was trying to find Gibbill, because I know I looked at it, I know it is on the maps, but I'll have to check. So would the resolution include us asking for the Gibbill to be recognised as an LNR as well?
I think what's happened is that the strategy has been drawn up in parallel with the process to designate the local nature reserve. So it probably wasn't there when the mapping was done in the first place. So we can include that.
Jim, they got the data from us, so I know our data has that, so that's why I'm surprised it's not in there. So I will check and we'll add that in, Chair.
Okay.
I can forward you the emails that
Right, it's moved and seconded with those amendments. Are we content to support that? Those in favour, thanks very much. That's carried. Next one, we've got apprentice and trainee funding. And Councillor Andy Bell, you've got your name against this one. Can I just reiterate some comments that I made previously in private? That we've got funding here to support 2 apprenticeships in offices, and at the same time that this was going through the sausage machine, Pendle Council was advertising for a gardening apprentice based down at Fleet Street, and rather than getting a proper salary, that apprenticeship was at £7.37 or £7.73 an hour or something like that. In addition to agreeing this, I'd like the council to review its 2-tier approach to these apprenticeships, because somebody working with their hands, to my mind, is just as important as people who are working with a pen or a keyboard, and we ought not to be discriminating in favour of what might be considered to be more professional roles rather than people who do work with hands and have artisan skills. Andy, sorry to say that.
Well, I actually agree with you, Lee, that if we're going to have an apprentice, that they're on an even keel rather than being segregated on a two-tier system. So I do support that wholeheartedly. Going through this documentation, and I will recommend this due to the last culinary committee which we were at, with Councillor Sarah Cobb, Dave Brass and Councillor Ash as well. One of the things that was brought up was, with building control, why are we still seeing enforcement letters coming through for the same building 6 years, 7 years? I actually came to visit to the council and I spoke to in building control. The answer on that was, we haven't got the manpower. Because of what happened to Grenfell, they've now got to the Odyssey, they've got to train. And for what they've got, they've got the 3-tier system, enforcement, site visits, plus all the auditing that they've got to do. It seems to be they are understaffed by an extreme amount. And when I got told this, I thought, well, yeah, I can see that. I understood that Colne area, I've seen the frustration at Colne area. And when I've read through the documentation that came through today, for the recommendation for 2 apprenticeships, because at the moment we can't get these people who are trained to come to the door because the private sector pays a lot more than what we can. But I agree with this where it went out to every departments, the departments came back with a case study, it's gone to HR and with it all down. And the application for a building control training and I've lost it in where it is.
Estates.
Sorry?
Estates.
Estates, yeah. So I would back this wholeheartedly, and hopefully this executive would second it and carry it forward. So I'd like to see that we've got the manpower in the right place now, rather than not have that help that we need.
Thank you. Would you be agreeable to adding a little bit to the resolution to say that we review apprenticeships in other areas of council's work?
Absolutely, it should be an even deal.
Yeah, thank you. Asjad?
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Bowser said, I think we approved this funding back in I think it was February's full council meeting, and everything should be on par with and I think that's what actually happened. I think officers did consult with all the departments, and the key thing here was it was trying to get areas where people were coming to near retirement, or something on those lines, where we could get some apprenticeship places. So we could get these youngsters in to gain that experience and the knowledge, and get them to that level, and fill the post that that could become vacant in the near future. And these 2 key areas again were very hard to kind of fill, especially building control. I think has been a massive issue. As Councillor Bell says, up and down the country there is a big issue. So I think the key thing was to get these people in, these apprenticeships in areas where they can gain that knowledge and the experience, and that's what's actually happening. I don't think it was not looking at certain areas, it was looking at all the areas, but these 2 areas were identified as the major ones that needed the uplift, if you will.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any further contributions? I've got Ash, Sarah then.
Thank you. I fully support this. I think it's great to support the upskilling and training of young people. People in general, because apprentices don't necessarily have to be young, but we always assume so. So first, that's my first point. Great thing to do. It's good to see that there's some succession planning and some thought about how this council operates. I think that's important. When I was a Lancashire County councillor, there's a fund created, a fund extended up to £300,000, creating £103,000 bursaries for businesses to support their apprentices within private business. And I just wondered if there was any possibility of the council accessing that fund. I genuinely do not know the answer to that question, and I just think it's worth exploring if there's a bit of extra funding towards this council upskilling its own staff. I think it would be a great help. One other thing...
Sorry, could you just repeat that, because I didn't quite get the sense of it?
So, Lancashire County Council have a fund.
Yeah.
It was £300,000 in the last financial year.
For businesses?
For businesses to support, but I don't know whether the council is a business. I don't know whether it would qualify as a local authority to, as under that, but I certainly think it's something worth exploring. It's not a huge sum of money, but if it's a case of applying for the funding and getting it, it all helps towards the cause. We recently, as an authority, also signed up to the Lancashire Skills Pledge, and I was really pleased to see that. There is a lot of support from the Lancashire Skills and Employment Hub and their forum, so it's really, really important that we engage with that. This is about investing in skills for young people, which is absolutely paramount importance in Pendle, and so I am fully supportive of this report.
Thank you. Sarah?
I'm also very positive about it, and obviously they whittled down the top two things, and you follow the logic on the second page, and I don't dispute the logic in any way. My personal plea would be if they were to create a new long list for apprentices, and it could be that time is called on this council before we get that opportunity, that I would put in for climate change officer and conservation officer to be added to the long list, but I'm sure that these were the right ones for now.
Well, thank you very much. I think in terms of the two suggestions that you make there, if we're going to have an apprenticeship scheme, I think it's incumbent on us to have the resources to support an apprentice. So if we haven't got a climate change officer, which will have a gap, you can't really have an apprentice going to be twiddling thumbs because there's nobody to guide them. And similarly, conservation officer, where we don't have a conservation officer, and that goes through Growth Lancashire. I'll declare an interest as a member of Growth Lancashire. So it's an ORI, but I'm saying that I'm not affected to any further extent than any normal member of the public. Just cover me back. So, I think in conservation terms, the Growth Lancashire is the area where we ought to be looking for that expertise. So, thank you very much for those comments. In terms of Ashley's suggestion, if we can add Andy to the resolution to see if we can tap into any county council funding. I'm sure the new administration at County Hall will be full of largesse, and if we could tap into that, that'd be great. So the proposal on the table is as recommended, together with a review of apprenticeships across the piece, and together with an approach to the County Council. All those in favour? Thank you very much, that's carried. And moving on then, item 8, revenue and capital outturn, and some good news, very good news here, in that getting to the end of the drawing of the accounts, Gemma Louise reaches down the back of the sofa and she finds an odd £1 million, and that has been quite significant, but overall the organic income has fully funded the additional expenditure that we've had throughout the year, and the £1 million down the back of the sofa has enabled us to put more money back into the reserves and sets us up nicely, I think, for the future, the next couple of years until we get to local government reorganisation. I think the downside of finding £1 million down the back of the sofa is that we'd rather known that it was there, but I'm sure our finance officer, Deputy Section 151 officer, wasn't hiding it down the back of the sofa. I do know that the processes have changed so as to monitor those income streams as well as the expenditure streams, so that we're not taken by surprise in future. But overall, I think that this is a good news story for Pendle Council. I'm delighted that we have been able to add to reserves to a greater extent than we were planning, and that it sets us on a firm footing for the future. The issues in terms of reporting, I think have been picked up, but I think I'd like to get agreement from the executive tonight that budget monitoring does include all those income lines as well as expenditure lines, so that we're fully sighted on where we are. Just to extend this a bit beyond the outturn for the last financial year. Looking forward, we have the so-called fair funding review, and on the face of it, that's a good news story in the terms that the deprivation that we have in Pendle will be recognised and the resources will flow with that. But the initial indications are that actually we stand to lose, I think it's some £400,000 as a consequence of that so-called fair funding. So a lot of that has to work through the processes yet, but I think we just need to have a weather eye on the adverse impact of something that should be benefiting Pendle and the residents in Pendle, but isn't doing so. I was minded to include a resolution tonight about the fair funding settlement, but I think we need to just have a greater appreciation of what the full impact will be before we start shouting about it. But we need to be aware that we may well need to shout about it if this good fortune of the funding that we did find is to be taken away, so we get it with one hand and we taken away with another, and then it's not good news. Just to finish, of course we didn't find the money down the back of the sofa. It was actually additional income from business rates and a small amount from council tax. So you know, any references to the back of the sofa are tongue-in-cheek. I didn't want anybody to think that we were not responsible with the protection of public finances. So I would move the recommendations on that with the addition about the budget monitoring, including income as well as expenditure. In terms of the slippages, there is a schedule set out, and I think those are all okay, and we should agree those. The capital programme, there is considerable slippage there, but it's the nature of the beast, and a lot of that is external funding, which we wouldn't be using for anything else anyway. So I would move the report as set out. And Gemma Louise is primed to respond to any detailed questions that people have. As Joe.
Joe, I echo everything you just said and second the report.
Thank you very much. David.
So just a question about this business rates one then. Can you explain to me, words of one syllable, about how a pooling gain works? I know we're all linked together across Lancashire. So how does the pooling gain work, and does every council who's part of the scheme across Lancashire then benefit to greater or lesser degrees? I'm assuming that's the case. So we've basically collected more business rates from people, and there's more to go around across all councils.
No, I don't think your assumption is correct.
Okay.
The pool, as I understand it, and generally will correct me, I'm sure, the pool, as I understand it, isn't paying as much to government, and so we retain more of the business rates here in the county. The downside of the pool is that we don't have the safety net that being part of the nationwide government system would otherwise give us. So there is a risk, and it's Lancaster that aren't part of the pool because the risk of their losing Heysham Power Station was so great that they preferred having the safety net rather than the benefit of the pooling gains that we've got. But in terms of the benefit, the £1 million down the back of the sofa, if I could call it that, part of that is pooling gain, but part of it is section 31 funding, which is a grant in lieu of business rates that may otherwise have been collected. So it's not all pooling gain, but some of it is. Gemma Louise, do you want to?
Yeah, so everyone who's in the pool benefits from being in the pool, there are no losers. The government sees us as one body, so the tariff that we would normally pay, as Councillor Wick says, we would normally pay, we don't have to pay to the government, and we pay only 10% into the pool. Thus, obviously, making gain out of it. The Section 31 grant is additional money that we received instead of business rates. In 2023 there was a revaluation of properties, business rate properties, rate valuation, which sees businesses having to pay more. This is done in a staggered way, so the government sends us the money instead of us getting it from members of the public, but businesses in our area. The figure used originally did not accurately estimate how much Section 31 grant the government would give us.
Okay, and in terms of visibility for the future then,
yes.
so we're not surprised as it were, how much visibility do we get of this sort of thing as it arises and develops?
It's obviously known that my team are below capacity and the monitoring of the collection funds hasn't been as active as it could have been. We have spent the last year having one of our trainee accountants and our technical accountant trained in this area by a business rates, well, collection fund expert. So we're primed to begin to include that in our monitoring so that we can start to see any ups and downs in that funding as the year progresses.
Okay, and on the bigger picture in a sense with national government, we know that Rachel is looking at business rates and what to do with the high streets and the big retailers and small retailers and whatever. So it's likely they're likely to squeeze people and maybe take a little bit more out of the pools across the country.
Well, the big threat there, the big risk, is that the new NNDR business rate system would do away with the pools. So, sorry, I'm thinking of Vernon's now, but would do away with the business rate pools, and as a consequence, the benefit would be wiped out, and that is recognised in medium-term financial forecasts, although I don't think there's any certainty as to what's actually going to happen yet. But it's a big risk.
Yeah, and I'm guessing our MTFP, of course, doesn't expect some income from this area anyway, so we're not likely to have to write anything out of it. We're just hopefully going to benefit from any upside.
Well, I think the danger is that we'll have to assume that there'll be less. Yeah.
Okay. And on the additional investment income, the £1 million extra we get there, we're still obviously hoping as a council that interest rates don't come down, despite the fact the rest of the country is hoping that, as we just sort of live off that interest income again. So obviously it's good that fed into reserves, it's good that saved the council's budgeting, because I notice in para 7 there's more words of overspend than there are of underspend. So I'm the eyes of doom on this one, I know I am. But living off interest is not the best way to have the council's finances, especially because when we talk then about the capital budget. If I move on to that, by the way, I think there's an error in the number, by the way. On the recommendation number 4, I think it's 23.59, not 25.5. If you look in the table on the back, that first column of figures has 23,592.77.
Gemma Louise? Typo.
Okay. And also on Appendix C, by the way, on the very top, the headings, you've got the slippage from 24.5, but then the next two columns should be 25.6. You're setting a new budget and then you've got your brand new overall budget there. I think on this, I think as you touched on earlier, there's been a lot of capex in the year. We spent over £14 million of our brought forward numbers, so that's good that we're making some progress on certain of our projects. I think we had some good ideas at the budget. I think all parties liked the idea of the CPO fund, and we've also got the Brownfield Support Fund as well. So Can I just ask that we've got plans to use these, plans to spend them, we know what we're going to do with them, we know how we're going to use them, rather than just have them sitting there as little pools of gathering dust items, which can happen with these bright ideas that we often have.
Okay. In terms of the funding that we put in the budget in February, that is of course for the current financial year.
Yeah.
We're looking here at the last financial year.
So I'm on about Appendix C for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we're looking at the out-term position.
Yeah, but we're also looking at 25/6 in the capital programme. So that's what I'm talking about. Just make sure we've got a plan for it. I mean, agreed it in February. You know, let's have a plan to buy up properties. We've done some work in Cone on lots of empty properties and blighted properties. We know the council's recruiting an officer to do that. Has recruited. So, you know, let's
Yes.
give them something to spend and get some...
It's not going to sit there in the bank. It is a fund to be used.
Good. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Very good. Any further comments? Okay, it's moved and seconded. Can we vote in favour of that, please? Thank you very much. And then moving on to the Treasury Management Strategy. And can I refer to the investment income here? Because, you know, it's been referred to as if it was a windfall, but I think people have worked very hard to ensure that we do have the investment return. And one of our officers has diligently moved money around, avoiding dodgy Icelandic banks and things like that, certainly working within the policy. And I think that we ought to be, as an executive, expressing our thanks for the work that's been done to ensure that those investment income targets are met, and that if we can pass on our thanks, I'll be most grateful for that. The top line is that we have got a healthy balance. The figures show that we've got more in the bank, as it were, than we did at the beginning of the year, and you know, I think it's good work all round, really. So I would move that we note the out-turn position, and as I say, thank our officers for the way in which they've ensured that our investments have got the best possible return and haven't just lain dormant and got a miserable rate of return. Asjad.
Yeah, thank you. Again, Chair, echo everything you just said, and thank you to David Louise's team, and appreciate that. So turn that back with you.
David.
Just looking at our debt and our borrowings, and section 3 of the detailed report, I notice our debt portfolio, we're paying 2.82%. And I think just below that, our investments, 33 million of them, seem to be earning 4.89%, just above base rate, which is absolutely a remarkable position. So I see the breakdown at the bottom of section 3 there. Who's paying the huge interest? Is it one? Yeah, is it one particular?
Yes, the government debt management office pays the highest rates usually, or as Councillor Rutherford points out, we have an officer who diligently checks all the possible rates in all acceptable areas of investment on a daily basis, and sends them much information about what I could decide to do with the money. So we can get slightly higher rates from our bank at the moment. Yeah. On overnight money, we've got investment with LCC, and we use the DMO to hold money on short term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
in terms of the borrowing, of course, the borrowing is spread over a number of years, and as an authority, we've taken advantage when interest rates were low, borrowing at that point. And currently, borrowing is being done internally rather than borrowing at more expensive rates. So from a debt management point of view, we are looking for interest rates to come down to make it advantageous to take more borrowing on. But you'll see in the report that I think there is £1 million that was redeemed during the financial year in question. Might not have that figure exactly right. But I think it is a healthy position, and I think to a great extent, to repeat what I said earlier on, that's down to the diligence of our officers in getting the best possible deal, and that is to be welcomed.
Just
anything further, David?
One follow-up. In the section before, section 2, we talk about the CFR and how that's growing, because that's an indication of the pot. We got our capital programme, so I noticed in the table on the second page of section 2, we've got it going up from 20 just under 21 million to 22.5 million. Do we know if that's going to carry on growing? Because obviously the preamble to it talks about the fact you've got to try and keep it down, you've got to put your charge in your MRP just to try and cap that spread. Do we have
finance requirement?
So the CFR will continue to grow as long as we agree to spending capital money for which we have no funding. There are options available to us, technical accounting options, to put money aside on a voluntary basis to more to pay back that money earlier to ourselves. So that figure is our internal borrowing need, or the prudential borrowing need, which we can borrow externally or internally. And whilst we're cash rich, and whilst we don't need to borrow, we will continue to borrow it internally, so that the MRP obviously just goes back into our own needs, just a technical adjustment. And we will look at options and bring those forward to you about voluntary revenue provisions as they seem offered.
Okay. And what assumptions have you made in the MTFP then?
We've assumed that going forward MRP will continue to grow.
Okay. Much beyond the sort of 600,000 it's got there? Are we heading into the million mark?
Yeah, I've added on around 50,000 a year.
Oh, right, okay. So not too bad then, not too bad. Right. Okay.
It does just depend on the actual progress we make with the scheme.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the other thing that I would just refer people to, which I do remind people of, is local government reorganisation. And, if we were thinking that Pendle Council will be an entity in 10 years' time, our strategy may be a little bit different to an organisation that has 3 years of life left to it. So I think there's some tactics in there that we need to take into account. Okay, the strategy is moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Item 10, water and wastewater contract. Can I just move that?
Second.
Thank you very much. And all those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Forward plan. Somebody move that one. Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. And the last item for me, I'll pack my bag and get off home, is exclusion of the press and public, and you will need to appoint a chair for the remainder of the meeting. So I'll leave that to you guys. So exclusion of the press and public on the basis that it's exempt information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person. So, we moved and seconded. No, we both have to leave. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Good night.
well, give it time.